Hello, everyone. Welcome to this class of Principles of Natural Resource Management. And today's discussion will revolve around concepts used in natural resource management. In this unit, we shall discuss the different concepts that are used in the study of natural resource management, which includes but not limited to environment, resource, natural resource, resource planning, resource allocation, and resource development. At the end of this unit, I will expect you, or you will be expected to be able to at least define the concepts used in natural resource management and to go ahead to also define these concepts. I mean, to go ahead to also apply these concepts. So it's not about you only being able to define, but also the application of these concepts is really so paramount. So let's dive right into the key concepts in the unit Natural Resource Management. The first concept is the concept of environment. This concept of environment tells us that environment is our surrounding. It talks about things around us. It could be the water, it could be the climate, the atmosphere, the different plants and animals, together with the non-living part of our, the built part of our environment, which includes things such as buildings, the roads, could be chairs, could be tables, name it. All the man-made part of environment is also considered as part and parcel of our surroundings. Now, there is a reason as to why environment is referred to as man and his surroundings. And the reason is that man derives all that he needs to support himself on a daily basis from the things around him. And if man is to continue deriving all this from the things around him, then man has to go an extra mile to take care of those things. Of course, you know very well that if you are to gain from something, that you must take care of that thing. If you don't take care of it, then it will not take care of you. This is the same arrangement between man and the things around him. If we fail to take care of things around us, then the next concept sets in, the concept of environmental degradation. Because we have been careless in the way we use the environment, then there will be depletion of resources. The air quality will change, the water quality will change, the soil quality will change, because we have tampered with its natural state. We have gone beyond its ability to support our needs on a daily basis. So you'll find today there has been increased rate of destruction of ecosystems. An ecosystem is simply any unit of environment that consists of both living and non-living things interacting together in harmony. So there is destruction of ecosystems occurring today. You'll find a lot of forests have been destroyed. The aquatic ecosystems such as wetlands, the lakes, the rivers have been destroyed. You'll find that the habitats of plants and animals have been destroyed. There is evidence of extinction of wildlife species on the planet today. There is widespread pollution. Even when you move around most of the towns, even in the villages, there is evidence of a lot of pollution, be it water, air, or soil. It is so evident. All of these are indications that there has been change or a disturbance in the environment. And this change can lead to a deleterious and undesirable kind of situation. So today, as we speak, much of our environment has actually been degraded. So there's really a problem on our environment today. The other concept is the concept of a resource. Ordinarily, a resource would mean anything useful, anything that is of benefit is a resource. But according to Zimmerman, for him, he says that for something to be actually referred to be as a resource, then it must be that thing that is of utility to man. If man is not utilizing that thing at a particular time, according to the gentleman called Zimmerman, then that particular thing does not qualify to be called a resource. If we look at what COVID has done today in the world, it has changed the arrangement of things. Today, I'm able to teach you from afar. You are not in the classroom setting. To Zimmerman, that would mean that the classroom setting is useless. It's not a resource. The chairs, the whiteboard, the markers, and so on, COVID has rendered them useless according to Zimmerman. So they are not resources according to his definition. But is it true that all of that infrastructure now becomes useless? Cannot be called a resource? I think the critics came up and said that it might not be true that everything that is called a resource must be that is of use to man. Remember, Zimmerman's definition was more of human-centered kind of definition, talking about something to be of utility to man before it can be referred to as a resource. So the critics came up and said, no, for something to be called a resource, it's not a must that it must be of utility to man. That is why at a later stage, another gentleman called Bruce Mitchell, in a later stage, came up with another definition. Bruce Mitchell said that for something to be called a resource, then it must be that thing that is abiotic, biotic, or associated to our cultures. Abiotic simply means non-living things. Biotic means living things. So in Bruce Mitchell's definition, it says that anything that is non-living, living, or associated to our cultures, as long as it is on the surface of the earth, in the earth, that is underground, or above the earth, on top, then it qualifies to be referred to as a resource. I think this is more of a general kind of definition that helps us understand clearly what a resource actually means. Bruce Mitchell borrowed an example of a shark, and he said that if we look at artisanal fishers from the Caribbean waters, those from the Western Caribbean And then we have those from the Eastern Caribbean. You find that artisanal fishers from Western Caribbean, when they find a shark in their fishing nets, they get disgusted. They are not happy, they are not excited that they have caught fish because their family and friends do not actually eat sharks. So to them, a shark is not a resource at all. The whole of it, when they get disgusted. They have not actually caught any fish because they don't consume it. They cannot even trade in sharks. So a shark is not considered as a resource according to the fishermen from Western Caribbean. But fishermen from the Eastern Caribbean, when they find a shark in their fishing nets, they get so excited that they have got a delicacy, food for their family and friends. So you can find that, you can realize that fishermen from the Western Caribbean do not consider a shark as a resource. But those from the Eastern Caribbean completely consider a shark as a resource. Again, Taiwanese fishermen cruising in the same water body, when they find heaps of sharks, their interest is only on the fins, F-I-N-S. Their interest is only on the fins. The rest of the body of the shark is thrown back into the water as waste. But the fins, they take them and offer to the huge Asian markets as an ingredient for making soup. So you can realize that in the same water body, the Caribbean waters, we have three groups of fishermen, those from the Western Caribbean, the Eastern Caribbean, and Taiwanese fishermen. The three groups are looking at the same resource in the same water body differently. In the Western Caribbean, it's completely not a resource. In the Eastern Caribbean, it's completely a resource. But the Taiwanese fishermen also look at just part of this shark as being a resource. So you can see that sometimes what you think is not resourceful to you could be resourceful to another. You can see that the definition of Zimmerman has been criticized completely when you borrow the definition by Bruce Mitchell. So sometimes certain things just deserve to exist, whether you're using them at present or not, let them exist. Who knows, there could be a reason as to why you are unable to use them presently. If I can again take you back to the example of COVID-19 and how it has affected a lot of institutions, especially when it comes to infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure is lying redundant in many institutions today. But that does not mean that that infrastructure is useless, because we still have hope that one day we shall again return to use that infrastructure the way we used to. That is, if it happens. That is, if all of us pray for it to return to that old normal. Some prophets of doom think we might not again return back to that state. It's a matter of time, and then we shall prove whether those prophets will be telling the right thing or we are the ones believing in the wrong thing. The other concept is the concept of a natural resource. A natural resource, like I had introduced earlier on, these are just resources that are given to us by God. These are endowments from God to mankind. But according to the National Environment Statute of 1995, for Uganda's case, it defines a natural resource as natural wealth. A natural wealth. It means wealth that is given to us by nature, for those of us who don't believe in God. But if you believe in God, a natural resource would mean that this is wealth given to us by God. So you'll find that in some of our places, be it in the South Sudan where there is oil, in Nigeria where there is oil, in the Congo where there are so many minerals, in Uganda where we have lakes, forests, land, air, lakes, rivers, mountains, and many more natural resources. It means that these nations are gifted by nature. Who knows how much individuals or nations generate from the oil, from the different minerals, from the forests, the soils, the air or the climate, the lakes, rivers, and mountains of these countries. This is what we are talking about as natural wealth given to us by God or given to us by Allah or by nature, depending on your faith. It is the same definition according to American Heritage Dictionary in 2003. For them, they also define a natural resource as simply a material source of wealth. There is no much difference with that by the National Environment Statute for Uganda's case in 1995. Natural resources can be subdivided into four, basing on origin, basing on availability, renewability, and stage of development. Basing on origin, natural resources can be biotic, meaning that these are resources that are living resources. So by origin, you find that we have living resources. And then we have non-living resources. So if we are to differentiate natural resources based on origin, you will find that we have just two, the living and the non-living natural resources. I know you will find examples for each of the categories there. Considering the stage of development, we have potential and actual natural resources. Potential natural resources, these are resources that exist in a region, but they are resources for tomorrow. They are resources for the future. I used to tell my students that when you have a campus girlfriend, that campus girlfriend might be your wife tomorrow. So she remains a potential wife of tomorrow. It's the same for the ladies. That campus boyfriend might be your husband tomorrow. So he remains a potential husband. So if we borrow that analogy, it's the same with the natural resources. We have natural resources in an area, but they are not being utilized at present, which means that in future, they may be used. They might not be used at present because of a number of reasons, which could be maybe there is no technology at present to use. Maybe we don't have the technology, the technical know-how. No. The technology of how to utilize these resources is missing. Maybe we don't have people who are trained enough to use and extract these particular resources. Maybe we don't have enough money, enough manpower, enough labor to actually utilize this particular resource. So until we get that, until we fulfill all those factors, then such a resource can actually be utilized. Until then, it remains a potential resource. Basing on stage of development, I said we have potential and then actual. So the other one is actual resource. Actual resource means that we have surveyed and we have known the quality and quantity of this resource. In other words, this is a resource that is being utilized at present. We are depending on it at present. If we are relying on Lake Victoria for water for drinking and so many other purposes, then Lake Victoria becomes an actual resource. However, that part of the actual resource that can be developed profitably with available technology is what we refer to as a reserve. That is it, basing on the stage of development. With respect to renewability, we have renewable and non-renewable natural resources. Renewable natural resources are those that are able to renew themselves, to restock, to replenish, to reproduce after some time, after being utilized. We can use an example of us human beings. We also fall in this category of renewable resources. We are not the ones who started. There have been a lot of human generations before us. In us, those generations that came before us have been renewed. And in us, more generations lie ahead of us that are going to renew our generation and the generations before us. This is a simple example of renewability. But you find that there is renewability for animals, renewability for plants, renewability for some of the non-living things. Some of them also can be able to renew themselves in a shorter period of time. So the trick behind renewability is that it has to happen within the human lifespan. If it happens beyond the human lifespan, then that is what we call the non-renewable natural resources. I hope you're not getting confused here. When a resource is called a non-renewable resource, sometimes they can't be able to renew themselves. The only difference, the only reason as why we don't call them renewable resources is that these ones happen after, they renew themselves after a very, very long period of time. We may not be there to tell whether this resource has renewed itself in the future. That's why it qualifies to be called a non-renewable resource. So non-renewable resources in simple terms are those resources that cannot be able to renew or replenish or restock or renew themselves after some time. Basing on availability, we have inexhaustible and exhaustible natural resources. Inexhaustible natural resources are those which are present in unlimited quantity. Means we can never finish these resources. Somebody might be asking now, what kind of resources are those when we are already crying of environmental degradation? The sun itself, or the sunlight and sun's energy, is a resource which we will never finish, however much we try. In fact, we are already crying of climate change, which means that instead of reducing, the sun's heat is even becoming much more than what we demand or than what we need on a daily basis. The air, we're also crying that it's becoming polluted, but not that it is reducing. It has never reduced in recorded history. So these are examples of resources that we have in abundance. We will never finish them. They are called inexhaustible natural resources. Inexhaustible natural resources is simply the opposite. These ones, we can finish them. They exist in limited amount. Given time, humanity can finish these resources, especially if our activities are really those that are unsustainable. In fact, some of these natural resources are already not existing today. Today, we are asking ourselves how a dinosaur used to look like. Why? Because it is no longer existing. In Uganda, we can no longer talk about white rhinos, even though I hear that we have some rhinos, white rhinos in the Uganda Wildlife Education Center. I'm yet to go there to prove whether they are there. But in the wilderness, Uganda doesn't have white rhinos. They are already extinct. So even if a resource is renewable, there can be a chance of it getting exhausted, getting depleted, extinct, completely disappearing on the surface of the earth. Already the human race is threatened by the coronavirus. People are fearing that time might come when we will cease to exist on this planet. I hope that one doesn't happen. But if it does, then maybe God has to start afresh. The other concept is resource planning. Resource planning. This is the same, planning is the same everywhere. You know, the same planning you do on daily basis, the same planning everywhere. It only changes based on the context. I usually tell my students that if you do not plan, then you will be forced to follow other people's plans. Your colleague will be telling you it is time to wake up, and then you wake up. And then time for us to go to campus, you will go to campus even when your timetable is reading. The next day is when you're having a lecture. You will follow your colleague the day when he has his lecture, and you go to campus. He will tell you, let's attend my lecture. You will attend the lecture even when you are not going to understand anything. And then time for lunch, you will move out for lunch. You know, time to go to Susu, you will go to Susu together. You are following the plans of the other person. That's not your plan. And sometimes when you do that, you know what happens. You will end up doing the wrong thing at the wrong time, or the wrong thing at the right time. Now, what does that mean? It means that all of us should learn to have plans on a daily basis. A plan is a guide. We know where we want to go, but how do we intend to go there? We have to arrange things along the way if we are to achieve what we desire at the end of the day. That's what we call planning in simple terms. So planning is simply a process that we use to develop a strategy to achieve desired goals or objectives, so as to resolve some problems and then to facilitate some kind of action. If you wanted to go to town, going to town is your ultimate aim or objective. But what are you going to do in town? How will you go to town? What means of transport will you use? What will you start with when you reach town? What will you use for coming back from town? How long will you stay that side when you go to town? You know, all this is part of your planning, plus so many other things. How much money am I going to spend when I go to town? Will I buy everything in town, or I will buy certain things? When I reach town, which particular arcade will I go to? All these questions you ask yourself before you move to town. You know, that reminds me of the time when I was in O-level. My parents used to tell me to write a list of items before they give me money for shopping. You know, this is an example of simple planning at that time, but I didn't pick it that time. I'm picking it now, that my parents had to know how much I wanted, what I wanted to buy, where I would buy those things from. At the end of it, will it fulfill everything that I need for me to report to school? And then how long will those things last with me when I report to school, so that they're able to know the next time to visit, to provide more in case I needed more, or if I made a call, they know that whatever they gave me the other time was over or is still there, but is about to get over. You know, all this is planning. I implore each one of us to do planning on a daily basis. Before you get out of your bed, you have to ask yourself, what am I getting out there to do first? What follows? And what follows again? and again until the end of the day. Which activities am I going to run? If you don't do that, then like I gave you the first example, you'll be forced to follow other people's plans. And when you follow other people's plans, then you're going astray. So planning simply reminds us that we have to go through a number of steps if we are to reach our desired ends or desired objective. We are left with two more concepts, and then we call it a day. The other concept is the concept of resource allocation. Where do we take resources and at what time? Of course, resource allocation has to reflect the goals, aspirations, and the priorities of the community. Spatial and temporal placing of resource simply reminds us of where and at what time. Today, in 2021, parts of eastern Uganda and parts of northern Uganda, probably stretching up to parts of South Sudan, there has been a little drought, a dry spell that has affected agriculture to a certain extent. People that side, some may not harvest completely, others are harvesting something small from their cultivation activity. A majority are already complaining there is famine this side. So already it is signaling that the priority of communities that side could be food. So when I mention the location, already I'm talking about space. We know where the resource is needed, and we know the priority of this community could be food. And we already know that it is this time that they need the food. So you'll find that if anybody wanted to use resources properly now in the Northeast, Northern, Eastern, and parts of the South Sudan, especially in terms of supply of relief items like food, this would be the right time when those people's priorities are tending towards demanding for food. So the food as a resource would not be misallocated. It would be allocated at the right time, at the right place, to the right people, basing on their goals, aspirations, and priorities. There's a story I used to hear about the government of Uganda thinking of establishing a meat factory in Karamoja. Karamoja is the semi-arid area in Uganda, far in the northeastern part of Uganda. These communities in the Karamoja area have been known as people who only eat animals when they have died natural death. Or they could find a way of getting blood out of this animal. That is the time when they will eat a product from their animals. If these communities have this kind of way of living, how do you expect them to sell their cows to the meat factory? So you'd find a lot of resource would go in establishing the factory. Unfortunately, there would be no raw material to be used in that factory for packing the meat and its products, because the communities would not sell the animals to the factory. At the same time, the people who consume much of this meat, they may not be anywhere near even that Karamoja region. It would mean a lot of resource would be spent transporting this product up to the city, far in Kampala and other parts of Uganda where we have some major municipalities and cities. So this would actually signal what we call misallocation of resources. So if we do not take resources to places or to communities at the right time, to the right place, basing on what these communities want, what their priorities are, then we are likely to end up misallocating the resources. Lastly is resource development. Resource development is simply about resource exploitation. If we have water in the River Nile and communities are able to divert the water in the River Nile for irrigation, then we say that we have developed the river water. So using that water for irrigation is an example of resource development when it comes to using water from the river. When communities cut trees from the forests for making timber, we say the forest has been developed in terms of timber. That's where I want us to end for today. We will continue from there next time. You go through the questions, let those questions help you understand the concepts that I have gone through right now. Kindly go through them so that they can be able to guide you in your preparations or your reading. Thank you. Have a nice day.